After you've completed the pantographic tracing on the patient, you're ready for the next part, which is to mount the pantograph onto the articulator so you can transfer the records, the scribings, into a degree setting which you can record. So first thing you would want to do is to take your pantograph and you'd want to more firmly join it together before you did much work with it. So dry it, and you'll take a little bit of sticky wax and sticky wax the back corners of the pantograph together. So you get a little bit of sticky wax and just tie these back edges together, and this will give us a little bit more strength to keep it from falling apart on us while we're working. Because right now all we have holding it together are these two little wax wells. Okay, now that we have that, that should take care of that. Now the next thing we want to do is these pins that we had that were pointing to the posterior reference points, we want to go and reattach these to your pantograph, because these will be used to fit into the mounting studs onto the articulator. Okay, now that these are... Okay, you have this now. One last thing, you'd want to come and brush any of the wax flakes off of these pads. Do this on all the pads. Be careful not to scrape the pads. What you're getting ready to do now is put a clear protective cover slip over your tracing so that you don't make extra marks. So you do these similar to the pads you put on earlier, except these are clear or transparent. So right now, go ahead and slip these over on your pads right now. After you have this, at the same time, you can take your brush, and if you brush these tips of these pins, you can remove what little wax has balled up on the end. It makes it a little bit easier to see the tips of these when you start to try and do your settings. Now, next thing is to adjust the pantograph to the articulator, the width you want to, so you have a slide ruler which comes with a pantograph. You go ahead and put it in here and measure, and this will give you a starting measurement to go by here. Looks like we're 56. So we'll take the articulator and we'll move it out to 56. Put your mounting studs in the articulator. Should lightly come contact, and it shouldn't be pressing the pantograph and flexing it any, and should fit on here without any flexing. It shouldn't be loose. It shouldn't go side to side. So once we have that adjusted, we can go ahead and snug this part up. And we'll take this off for just a second, and we'll come back and adjust the upper part of the articulator to fit the lower. Set the latch. Snug up the adjustments. Now, check. You'd rather be a little bit loose than too tight on your adjustment now at this stage. Looks like we're real close. The centric latch shouldn't be pushed off to one side or the other by being too tight. Now, you have two quick mount jigs, one's silver and one's black. Now the black one goes on the lower. It has an adjustment screw which you adjust through the back of the instrument. Okay, this table comes out and can be reversed. In other words, if you need more room and the clutches are further back, you can turn it this way. If the clutches are further to the front, the majority of the table is to the front side. So this one's reversible. The upper one is not. So the silver one goes on the upper. When you have it attached correctly, the adjustment screw for the upper comes out the front of the instrument at an angle like this. Okay, first step now is to go ahead and screw these screws all the way in lightly to where they just come to the end. This is what's going to engage your mounting. And we'll go ahead and just set this in here right now to see which direction we need it. Now, looks like we have a little bit too much to the back, so we'll take it and we'll turn this around. We'll put it to the front. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to lift this tray up to where it just lightly, you want the screws to just lightly touch the clutch. And go ahead and snug it down. Now, after this, taking back these screws out about 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn. Now for the upper, again we'll take these screws on the upper, take them and turn them where you screw them all the way down to where they just lightly touch all the way down. Put the upper on here. Now we'll go ahead and drop this down to where it touches the clutch and then tighten it up. Now take these screws and back them out just a little bit. Now this will do several things. It'll give you a minimal thickness of acrylic that you're going to have in here. You can see we have just a little bit of acrylic that's going to be filled in here. Now when we get ready to unmount this, it'll be a simple matter of taking your wrench, taking this wrench, and you'll screw all the way in on both sides, and it'll pop the acrylic loose, and then you just back them out, and they'll break off real cleanly. So now we'll go through the mounting, putting the acrylic on. You have, again, same equipment you needed earlier. You had your acrylic with your monomer, cotton swab, and your tongue blade. Now when we mount this, go ahead and use a whole measure of acrylic powder. And we'll go ahead with that. Now, you'll end up having too much acrylic because you don't need a whole scoop. So don't expect to use the whole measure of acrylic when you're doing this. Again, we'll set it aside, and like before with the clutches, we'll take the cotton swab and we'll paint the clutches to make sure we get a good bonding. It has to be firmly attached to the articulator so we can go through the motions to get the adjustments. So here we'll paint this. Now we don't have to wait quite as long as we did with the other, so we'll get a little bit of acrylic. You don't want to get too much. Come in here and put it on your lower. Make sure it's adapted over the screws good. Okay, set it down in through there. You don't want it running over the edges. Make sure that it doesn't get into the area where the bearing screw is in the back. In other words, this area, you don't want it to get in. You don't want to bond the clutches together, so make sure you don't get too much in there. On the upper, same thing. We'll make sure it's adapted around the screws real good. And we'll close it in. Make sure it's not real runny where it runs down into in between the clutches and bonds the clutches together. Now this completes the mounting, and next step is to go ahead and do the setting where you'll start disassembling it, where you can follow out the setting procedure.